Welcome to the Ditch the Struggle podcast. I'm your host, Alana Rosso. I'm a graphic designer turned career and success coach who knew I could do better, but kept falling short of where I wanted to go. But after years of exploring personal and career development, business, money mindset, and energy work, I'm here to tell you that yes, you can move from stuck and defeated to empowered and confident. Ready to dive in? Awesome. Together, let's ditch the struggle. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Ditch the Struggle. I have another interview today, and this is with Jolie Rose. She is a creative copywriter. I'll read her bio in a sec, but she is a multi-passionate. She has a non-linear career, which is my favorite. I think we've established that. She has lived in New York. She knows how to find her talents. She knows how to trust herself. And she's going to leave you with an amazing question that you can ask yourself weekly that will help you see how you're really doing with your business and your life. So stay tuned right to the very end because she's going to give you this amazing question. So Jolie is a creative copywriter who transforms ideas into words that capture the essence of you and your work. With over 10 years in the fitness and wellness industry and 7 years in business for herself, Jolie's work is all-encompassing as she has the skills and knowledge needed to prioritize what you need to make strides forward. Being a personal trainer, health coach, and Reiki master, she understands what it means to be multi-passionate and how important it is to use words that truly resonate with your audience, because no one wants to be asked, what is it that you do again? Jolie's work spans from brainstorming and idea generation to copywriting and storytelling for creative entrepreneurs looking to grow. You guys are going to love this episode. We're going to dive right in. Welcome, everyone. I am thrilled. We have Jolie Rose today, a creative copywriter, and full disclosure, she has done some brilliant copywriting for my website. I hired Jolie. I love Jolie. And I want to hear more about her story today because she has a really interesting one. I believe, and she will confirm soon, that she does not have a linear career story. And super excited to hear that. So welcome, Jolie.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited. And yes, absolutely. I do not have a linear career whatsoever, which I feel like is something we bonded over immediately too.
Yes.
Cool. Not everyone has a linear career. This is exciting to recognize.
Yes, it was like one multi-passionate meeting another multi-passionate and one multipotentialite meeting another multipotentialite. I don't know if you know that term, but so that is something we bonded over and love to discuss.
Yeah. So I graduated college in 2015. I studied psychology, but kind of delved into my love for health and wellness throughout that 4-year journey. And really just things kind of trickled in from there of more certifications, more qualifications, more ways to work with people. And it was always something that I just loved, that face-to-face connection with people, being able to answer their questions, being able to just kind of go in, work with them, and then not have to take my work home necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
After college, I found a job working for an amazing small women's fitness studio. It was something where I was scrolling. I was like, I don't want to work at like a big box gym, personal training.
Yeah.
It was one of those things where I knew I loved coaching. I knew I loved training and teaching and really connecting with people in those aspects of health and wellness. And this woman was so gracious with me. I actually drove to the studio. This is something, again, 2015. 7 minutes away from my home, drove to the studio. No one was there. I picked up a business card and called her and I said, hi, you don't know me, but I'm Jolie. And I feel like I need to work with you and work for you. And from there, it just one thing went into another. And she's like, yeah, why don't you come into the studio next week and we'll chat?
Wow.
And something that probably wouldn't happen today, as you know what I mean?
So she was receptive to like when you said that.
She was so receptive. She was so receptive. And I think it struck her in a way that was like, oh, this woman is ballsy, or she's interesting in a way. And she still uses this story when she does talks and things like that today, because the way that the conversation ended, I actually asked her, okay, what should I wear to the interview? I asked her, what should I wear? Because being in the fitness world, you never know. Should you show up in fitness clothes? Should you show up in professional? And she's like, just wear whatever you're comfortable in. That's that's good. But I could tell that that question kind of struck her in a way of like, oh, this woman is prepared. She's
Yeah.
ready.
Yeah.
She's willing. And so that was kind of my first job out of college was just incredibly multifaceted. I did administrative work, training, coaching, managing the studio. It was a very fast-paced environment, but it was so enjoyable for me because all of the work was in this one place. And I
Hmm.
learned so much from her.
And did it do well? Was it doing well, the studio?
It was. And there was a lot of coaching. There was a lot of semi-private training, and I did some social media work, behind the scenes work and things like that too. But the studio was, it was, again, it was women focused. And so
Yeah.
it was only women, but it was something that I think in 2015, we definitely needed more places like that. So I think it really attracted women who were looking for something different. They knew they had a holistic outlook on
Okay. Yeah.
wellness and they wanted more out of that.
Yeah. And you really put yourself out on the limb from the beginning, like just that part that you picked up the phone, because it reminds me of a client I was working with, and she went to a venue that she wanted to work at with her like old school paper resume. Like this is just a couple weeks ago, and was like, I really want to work here. I really want to meet you. And I think you need to meet me. Like that kind of vibe.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's one of those things where you are interviewing them as they're interviewing you,
Yeah.
and you're selling yourself and you're showing your passionate and your
Yeah.
excitement.
I love that.
And being as young as I was, I didn't know to think like, oh, is this being too much? Or is this, there wasn't enough time for me to get into my head about
Oh,
it.
I
It was
love
just one
that.
of those things
Yeah.
where I was like, this is the gut feeling, gut reaction,
Yeah.
gut response. We're calling, we're doing it. And one thing
That's
led to another. And so I worked for her for 2 years before moving to New York. And it was just learned so much in just entrepreneurial world,
yeah.
working for her too.
That's amazing. And so then where did you go after that? So is this when you head over to New York?
Yeah, 2017, moved to New York, my husband and I. And from there, it was things just picked up, especially, you know, this, I'm sure, just living in a city, there's such an interesting energy there. It's like this tangible, like hustle culture,
Yeah.
but, and hustle culture was very prominent, I would say, in that 2017 era of
Oh,
just like
absolutely.
push, push, push.
Yeah. That was like the
So
height of girl boss, boss babe, hustle culture, building my empire, get out of my way. I'm doing my thing. I feel like that's when it was really peaking.
very much so, very much so. And when I got there, it was one of those things of like kid in a candy store of there's so many gyms, there's so many studios, there's so many things. And I found myself working at two studios, for people familiar, one on the Upper West Side, one on the Upper East Side. So there were high profile like CEOs
Yeah.
that I was training and working with. And then there was more of the holistic clientele that I was working with. And all the while I was building my online business behind the scenes. So I'm working for these two places and
Okay.
then started my own online business of health coaching, life coaching, turned into healing work. So I was always just, I could never choose just one thing in any part of
No,
my
I
life. And I don't think
know.
we have to. I don't think we have to, but
Do,
that's it. Yeah.
like, did you feel pressure? Like, was your brain going there throughout all these jobs that you've done that you need to be focused and pick one thing?
I got very good at just being incredibly present with whoever I was working with and whatever I
Hmm.
was doing. And it was this interesting thing of, okay, I'm here training this client or doing body work on this client. And let me rush home, eat some lunch, and then hop on a call with a client. Maybe I'm doing virtual healing work with them. So I got very good at kind of switching
Yeah.
the button, if you will, of masculine to feminine, if you will,
Hmm.
and just being able to be incredibly present. That said, there were definitely times where I was like, maybe I should just go all in on the
Yes.
personal training because
All
I'm good
in
at it.
thing. Oh my
Maybe I
God.
should just go all in on building my
Yes.
virtual online empire,
Yes.
right?
I love that you said all in because I have personally struggled with that because I do so many things. Like even if I look at how this morning, I don't know how many different things I've done since before I even got on this recording, right? And changed gears from design to coaching to all the things. And yeah, I really wrestle with that whole concept of all in because I beat myself up sometimes that I'm too fragmented. I've done too much in a day. I'm not really focused, or maybe I'm not focused enough, but yet I love the variety. And so how can we actually make that work for us? And I feel like I play, it's like mental, I vacillate between I'm doing too many things. I just need to go all in, but I love doing all the things.
Absolutely. And I think it is a spectrum, and we
Yeah.
should treat it as such, and we need to treat it as such, because
Mm,
what success looks like for one person is going to look very different than what success looks like for another person. And that's okay. Maybe you want to
yeah.
make 6 figures in a year. Maybe you want to try and make 6 figures in a month, right? It's kind of identifying what is that not only you need, but also what you want,
Okay.
and making it work with your skills, right?
Yeah.
And so I think for me, it was always something of, on one level, I always wanted more. I wanted to work
Mm,
with more people. I wanted not necessarily more reach, but I just loved that in-person connection. And there was
okay.
a point in time where I think I had 12 in-person clients, was walking about 10 miles a day throughout the
Oh my
city. And I'd come
gosh.
home and I had 7 virtual clients. And so I was trying to make that work in a week while still posting and marketing myself on social media.
Yeah.
Right. So there did come a point in time where it was like, what am I doing? What does growth look like for
Yeah.
me?
Great
Where do I
question.
see this going? And is this sustainable?
Yeah.
Forget growth, forget the
Yeah.
money. Like, is
Yeah.
this sustainable
Can you
for my
keep doing
body?
that? Like, really? Can you keep doing that?
Right. Right. And so the busiest years were 2018 to up until 2020,
Yeah.
when, the world shut down and everything had to transfer to virtual.
Yeah.
And that's, where I started to have a deeper connection with my body of, okay, we've broken some things down. We've had a lot of aches and pains. We
Yeah.
haven't been feeding ourselves. We've been checking our email nonstop.
Yeah. Yep.
And it's probably not the healthiest thing for me. So
No.
2020 was a big pivot for myself, just like I know so many others,
Yeah.
of, okay, what's working? What's not? Where are we going?
It's that time of reflection. And I love that you've mentioned the eating part. I can't tell you how many times I'm talking and coaching a client and we have to sit down and come up with an eating plan. I'm not as a nutritionist, but like, how can we make time in the day for you to eat? Like, this is crazy. Like, if you're not actually having time to have proper lunches or snacks or whatever it is you need, or a proper dinner, there's a bigger problem here. So, yeah.
Right. I was just talking to a friend about this, and I was saying, I find it so interesting how someone can ask the question, have you eaten today? Or they
Yeah.
could say,
Yeah.
just a reminder to eat today.
Yeah.
And sometimes that can really hit you in the chest of,
I
oh my
know.
gosh, yeah, how am I treating my body? Forget just my mind, and like, am I
Yeah.
taking time to rest my mind?
Yeah.
But it just
The
the body in
basics.
general,
Yeah.
the basics, and especially being in health and wellness, right? Not
I
feeding
know.
yourself. You feel the
Please eat.
repercussions.
Yes. Yeah. So 2020 comes along. Things are obviously shifting crazy. We're moving to online. What were you thinking? What were you feeling about your career at that time?
I had already been doing a lot of my coaching online, and
Right.
most of my movement or body work clients were in person in the city. And so for me, it was this pivot of, okay, I've kind of got a foot in both worlds, of in the virtual, I'm used to
Hmm.
the social media, the marketing, but also the in-person work. And now,
Hmm.
okay, things are moving virtual. A lot of my clients did move with me and stuck with me throughout that whole virtual time. And it really got me thinking in this introspective way of like, what is it that I want? What have been constants in my life? What are the skills that I bring to the table? What are the things that I enjoy? And again, that question of like, should I just pick one thing? Do I need to just
Yeah.
pick one thing? So it was kind of a cycle, if that makes sense, of,
Yeah.
do I need to put all my eggs in one basket, or can I keep doing multiple things and being this multifaceted person? And it always came back to, someone is coming to you for something, you're going to give them, being a high performer, you're going
Hmm.
to over deliver. You're going to over deliver the things that they need in the best possible way.
Yeah.
And that's not just going to be by movement. It's not just going to be by coaching. It's not just going to be with a Reiki session, right? It's so many
Yeah.
things together.
Yeah. You do over deliver in the best possible way. Yeah. But okay, can I just, I want to picture what you were doing with the movement and the body work that you're doing clients. What did that look like? What I know you do a few different modalities, but walk me through what a session would look like.
Yeah. So some of my clients were true blue personal training, cut and dry, if you will, where
Okay.
they'd come in and they were always intuitively led. I was always very well versed on the person's just biomechanics and
Yeah.
knowing anatomy, the way that they worked. But for the women who were more in need of just let's slow down a little bit. Let's hone in on like, how is your body actually feeling today? And let's let that lead the session instead of like, let's work out super hard.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the session would involve some mobility, flexibility. I would be doing some hands-on stretching techniques with them.
Okay.
And usually the last 10 minutes or so, we would be focusing on breathing practices. Some energy work was usually done hands-on for the end of the session too. And that was always something that it's kind of like the cherry on top of the session for them, if you
Yeah.
will, where they're always ending, hopefully better than when they came
Yep.
in. But it was always a little bit different every time, especially depending on who the client was and if they were living this like hustle and bustle
Yeah.
type of a life, or if they were older and more retired and needed just a little bit more energy at the end of a session too.
So I'm hearing you kind of follow your intuition then in those sessions as well. Is that correct?
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so was it a situation sometimes when people come in for the one thing and then you knew that that's not maybe where we need to start with the session?
100%. Oh, almost always. And there were so
Yeah.
many people who, especially even just living in a fast-paced world, would
Yeah.
come in and they'd want to, it was I would teach them a movement and they would be rushing through it with whatever the movement was or the breathing was. And
Yeah.
so that slowdown for them,
It's hard.
I'd say 90% of the people I worked with needed to actually focus and hone in on the breathing and on the alignment and
Yeah.
on, okay, let's just be. We're going to just be and we're going to hang out on this foam roller for 10 minutes, 5 minutes.
Oh, I'm sure that
And
was
that
so
was always the
uncomfortable for
hardest.
people.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially again, in a
Yeah.
city where there's so much, you're tight for time in so many ways, right? So having people slow down in that way was definitely a challenge, but it was always something that they'd leave feeling, wow, this was exactly what I needed today. And I ate that up. I loved that feeling. You gave
Yeah.
me exactly what I needed was the best thing you could tell me in any session.
Perfect. Yeah. Like the perfect feedback.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was something that always made me want to grow and made me want to do more, of made me want that feeling
Yeah.
of connection with people. Because
That's
if I'm giving someone what they want and what they need, let me do more of this. How can I do more of this? And that definitely fueled my career in that way of like, again, what am I good at? What are the skills I bring to the table? What are the gifts I already naturally have? And I'm sure you resonate with this
I
too. Like,
do. And we
there,
forget what our skills are. Like that's sometimes why someone needs to talk to a coach because they can't see themselves in any way objectively. And then we dismiss our most innate talents, the things that come really easily to us. So did you sit down and consciously be like, okay, I'm going to write out a list of everything I'm good at? What does your process look like?
it's funny because it was writing and journaling out those things of what am I good at? What do I bring to the table? And funny enough, writing was always a constant for me in my life. I would
Okay.
write and journal and have so many documents and emails of my just writing to myself notes and ideas and things. And it was always in conversations with people, always kind of getting myself into a room with people or networking or groups and having people reflect back to me like, oh, that's a skill. That's something that not everyone is good at. And it was almost as if I
Hmm.
needed that reflection back to me of you're doing something that not everyone knows how to do.
Yeah.
Whereas I would take that skill for granted of like, oh, I can write. Everyone can write. Everyone, what are you talking
No,
about? Of
everyone
course,
can't
everyone,
write.
right? But it's something where you can,
Yeah. I
in that
love that.
entrepreneurial world, you can be so alone with your thoughts
Mm.
and get into the thinky brainies, is what I
Yeah.
call it, when
Oh,
you're so
thinky
disconnected from
brainies.
your gut
Yeah.
and you're just in this place of okay, like but am I good at this, am I and it's so easy to kind of attach to that external confirmation of it. So it's a dance. It's definitely a dance.
Yeah. Okay. Love thinky brainies. I'm stealing that one for sure. And that is really common too. Yeah. That people don't really have a sense of what they're good at and do any reflection on that. And they're shocked when they're like, oh, wow, not everyone can write. Not everyone can organize a closet. Not everyone knows how to put the right pillows on a couch or whatever it is.
Yeah, absolutely. And when it came to copywriting, it was something
Okay.
that kind of came into my orbit at first in late 2020, early 2021. And it was that
Okay.
first inkling of, oh, people hire writers to write things for them,
Yes.
which sounds wild to say because it's such a rampant field. There's so many people who are copywriters, even just as a side hustle. And it was one of those things where, oh, okay, let me educate myself a little bit. I wasn't ready to step into it.
Mm-hmm.
And then late 2022, I was like, oh, okay, you know what? Let me dive into this. Let me go into this course. Let me educate myself more and
Okay.
see where this can lead me, because I have these 10 years of health and wellness knowledge and just all this experience, and that I would love to be able to give to other businesses. So I definitely felt this pivot in how I was delivering to people and how I was helping them better themselves instead of just, quote unquote, just coaching them. I really wanted to help them build their business and help them build and share their work with the world in this new way, or new way to me.
Right. So the common thread seems to be like improvement, transformation, building things up, like whether you're building someone's body up, building their health up, and helping people build businesses with their copy and you also do like a lot of great strategy work with your copywriting. So there's definitely some like there is like that golden thread as I call it, but you definitely pivoted. Like did you go to school for copyright like for writing? Like was that something you loved in school back in the day?
I I took creative writing classes and things, electives, just for
Okay.
fun, and it was one of those things I never saw as, but I also never saw personal training as a career
Okay.
field, and health and wellness and coaching as a career field. When I went into college, I wanted as many letters at the end of my name as I could, and
Okay.
to go through psychology and go have so much education, and quickly learned that was not for me. I don't want to be in school forever, but I always want to keep learning and keep
Yeah.
improving and keep growing in a different sense. So there
Had,
was always that push and pull.
right. And how did you let go of that desire or expectation to have all those letters? Well, you got some letters after your name. But, but just like how did you let go of like, oh, maybe I'm not going to do this fancy like master's or
Right.
PhD or whatever it was.
Right. Maybe I'm not going to be a doctor, but that is
Yeah.
not the only version of success and what success looks
Right.
like. So it was something that I was just quickly able to pick up in kind of an energy sense, or an intuitive sense
Yeah.
of, okay, I'm enjoying teaching people in fitness classes and to work with people with their bodies and in person, and I love health and wellness, and this can be something that
Hmm.
I can use. And it was actually my husband who, when we were dating, he's like, you would be great at marketing. You'd be great at going into just health and wellness. You can do that. You don't need to continue going to school. And that was something that was planted early
Oh,
on for me
interesting.
too, of, okay, maybe I can carry this on. This is someone who I know and I love,
Yeah.
who can see this in me before I could almost see it myself. And then of
Mm-hmm.
course, like friends, family, can also confirm it, but coming to it yourself, I think, is a whole different story. And having that experience with Lindsay, was her name, the owner of the studio, was a big kind of turning point in my life of, I'm good at this and I trust myself enough to continue with this.
Right. The self trust.
Yeah.
Did that
Yeah.
come innately or did it just build over time and have that switch when you worked for Lindsay?
It was always an underlying thread
Okay.
of, take the messy action, notice how
Mm.
you're feeling through it, notice how you're feeling after it, and kind of that saying of like, do it scared, or ready,
Yeah.
fire, aim.
Yeah.
Those kinds
Yes.
of
Yeah.
themes
There's
were,
something to that. Yeah.
there's definitely something to that, and that experimentation that has to has to happen. It happens differently, I think, for a lot of different people who, whether you're in the corporate world or out, you're just trying new things and seeing what happens, and following through and doing more of what's working and building from there. So I think it was always an underlying thread for me, but something that we always have those kind of those dips, those peaks and valleys of, we don't trust ourselves enough to do something and we're at a low, and then we listen to a talk or a podcast or something and it really resonates
Yeah.
and
You
we're
perk
on
up.
the up and up again.
Yeah. Sometimes
Yeah.
it really does take one podcast or one something. Okay. But what I'm also hearing there is you have some comfort with risk.
I would say yes, but maybe calculated risk in a
Okay.
way, in some sort of convoluted form of whatever
Yeah.
calculated means,
Yeah.
right? But I would also argue too that, is it risky when you trust your gut? Or is that something where, I don't know, the words are escaping me, but being able to kind of trust your gut in a way that, okay, I'm feeling this and I know that I have enough trust in myself that like this is going to work. If this does not work, I've got a plan B, plan
Hmm.
C, and then
Hmm.
we can pivot from there.
You've got all
And
the
that's
plans because
right.
you did so many different things.
Yeah. And there have been times where I've done things and they haven't
Yeah.
worked, right? I've had to reschedule workshops or reschedule different pieces of, projects and programs and things that I've done. And I think that just steers you back to the path, or it's a pivot.
Yeah. To get the most like 2020 word out there, pivot. Yeah. It is a pivot. Like
Yeah.
I never heard that word used so much. But okay, so what do you tell yourself? What are those thoughts you come up with? What's that inner dialogue when something's not working or a project didn't work or something kind of flopped? What are you telling yourself?
I would be lying if I said it didn't automatically just feel like a punch to the gut. I think there is always that kind of innate feeling of like, oh man, am I doing something wrong? Why didn't this work? And we get stuck in the
Mm,
whats and the hows and the
hmm.
whys and like, am I even on the right path? And having that low after that feeling kind of comes through, I always just notice again having something inspire me, having something, whether it's something that I am in the process of reflecting on and writing, or
Yeah.
during a workout, something comes through that gets me back in that zone of, oh, no, 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 no. Like we are actually on the right path, quote unquote,
Yeah.
but we're just moving in a way that's not necessarily looking like it's linear to
Yeah.
an outsider. But for us, it's it almost is linear in a way
Yeah.
where our skills are being transferred in different ways.
Yeah. And the failures are part of the right path potentially. But it doesn't feel that way.
Absolutely.
Sometimes, like I think there's just such a weird interpretation of failure right now, or that's
Yeah.
like sometimes you hear those things like it's not failure, it's just, you're going in a different direction and they make it all sound all shiny and bright, but it can be really hard. It's really difficult, but it's just part of the right path often. Like I just believe that we do get to where we need to go, but it's not linear as to what you said.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think it's too with failure, things have gotten so maybe soft is the
Yeah.
word, where people are almost afraid to use the word failure. They're like, oh, it's not a failure. It's you're just like
Oh,
turning the
yeah.
page and you're just going into the next
Yeah.
journey. And it's like,
Yeah.
call a spade a spade. It
Yes.
can be a failure. Failure isn't a bad word.
No, no. Let's call it a flop. Let's call it whatever, like something. I love that expression, call a spade, because I do think there is this like, oh, we can't call it that. We can't be so harsh. We can't, because if we call it failure, then we're being perceived as being negative and not positive. And then that taps into toxic positivity, which drives me freaking nuts. Like you can't criticize something or look at the data and say this is garbage or this doesn't work. So, um, but it is just feedback at the end of the day. It's like, okay, this thing didn't work. But yeah, let's call it a failure. Let's bring back failure.
Let's bring it back. Yeah. Failure is feedback. 100%.
Yeah. Okay. So then you're realizing you have like love of copywriting, love of words. I love that you have love of words too. I get really hung up on words, actually. I love words. They can be really so powerful. You're getting back into writing. What is that starting to look like in terms of building a business?
When I started copywriting, I joined a program first to actually start educating myself and actually understand, okay, what is not just what is copywriting, but how can you actually build a business around copywriting? And there's a popular program, Write Your Way to Freedom by Sarah Turner, who's been doing copywriting for, I think, over a decade now. And she's really built a big community of people who help to teach the course. And you learn so many facets of what copywriting is, what copywriting isn't, how to pitch yourself to people, how to
Ooh,
build from the bottom up. What does freelancing look like? How to actually market yourself in a way that people want to talk to you? Or if you want to work for a business, what does that look like? So it was kind of the best of both worlds of learning the techniques and the tools, but also learning the back end of,
yeah.
and some of it I already knew in terms of building a business, but marketing yourself, what does that look like? And
Yeah.
so that's where things kind of started. I really just dove headfirst into that world.
Okay, write your way into, what was it called?
Write your way to freedom.
Write your way to freedom. Okay, I've never heard of this. But so can I ask the logistic? I love logistics. Was this like a 6-month course, 3-month? What did it look like?
So the course is technically self-taught,
Okay.
is pre-recorded. However, there are lives every week where
Yeah.
you can hop in and
Yeah.
but it's definitely self-taught and hours and hours and hours of videos. I completed the course. I want to say it was 3 to 4 months, which
Yeah.
they say it can be done in like 6 months or less, depending on how much time you want to dedicate to it. And it's something where you start learning, but at the same time you're learning, you're taking this information in, you're also implementing it immediately.
Okay.
So it's almost to relate it to a car crash, right? It's
Yeah.
a terrible metaphor, probably, but if you are in a car crash, you're afraid to get back into the car because you're like, what if I forget what I'm doing? What if
Yeah.
I'm not driving
Mm-hmm.
correctly? Same thing with copywriting. So many people are afraid to start. So many
Mm.
people hit the start button and then they pause and they freeze and they get worried. So it really helps you move and grow through the process as you're learning.
So you got ongoing support too. Would you say that was huge for you?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Being able to ask questions and see how people have built their businesses and how people are marketing themselves. It was a great experience.
I love that you bring this up because whatever niche you want to go into or however you want to pivot your career, there is some kind of course or group you can join to get you there. And I'm a big fan of doing, like the experts who have a course. Obviously, you're not going to take everything they say. You're going to take what you want, leave what you don't want. But it is, I love the expression. Well, it's an expression. I just started like, I've always thought this way, just emulate, then innovate. So take what they have, kind of try and kind of copy it ish, and then you start making it your own.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's something that I think it's inspirational for some people. For others, you have to have, I think, uh, that idea of being a self starter in a way,
Yeah,
right? If you're
you do.
signing up for a course like that or doing any sort of schooling or education, you have to have that kind of like ignition
Yeah.
of, okay, how do I want to start this? Because it's one thing to just take in all the information, keep studying, keep learning, qualifications, certifications, and not stop and not actually implement. So yeah, I love how you said that. It's definitely a journey.
So then you did implement, like you brought it in, which is really key. It is so easy to get addicted to the learning piece and the certifications, what you talked about. I feel like there's been times in my life where I got really into that. I'm letting that go now, and the action implementation. So how did you just start implementing?
The way that I just started implementing, I have a very good friend here who was in the process of starting her craniosacral therapy business. And she was like, it's so funny that you are learning to do this because I need a copywriter. I need someone to write my website. And that was the first website I ever wrote. I did I did her social media, so many pieces just kind of come all crashing down
Yeah.
in the most beautiful way possible. I say that the most beautiful way. And seeing the gratitude for her of
Mm,
she knew who her ideal client was. She wanted to be part of the journey and the process, which I love being part of the journey, part of the
yeah.
process, part of the idea generation for someone. And so that was really my first kind of tiptoe dive really
Yeah.
into the world of like, what does this look like doing it for someone else instead of just practicing and doing it on my own and writing my own things and being
Yeah.
able to see that response from someone else of like, you nailed it. These are the words that my ideal client's using. And this is, again, that was that feedback that really made me
Feedback.
want to keep going.
Yeah. And it just so beautifully bridges your health and wellness background. I love that the first client you have is craniosacral and the copywriting. And you understand innately the story of transformation because that's what you were doing in your career as well. And you're now bringing it into words.
Definitely. Yeah, absolutely. And it was just something where, okay, I've never written for a craniosacral therapist before, but I know what it is and I know what it's about and I know you and what you're trying to
Yeah.
convey. So it was, again, I think any client, there is that journey and that process that you need to understand who they're helping, who they're serving in order to use the words that are going to resonate with their people. And I really love being part of that, which is kind of this fine line, I think, with copywriting. And I'm sure designers have this too, where
Hmm.
it's almost like that idea of, okay, I can't do just one thing. It's almost like I can't help myself. I want to be part of this brainstorming process with
Yes.
you, or these ideas of like, who are you trying to call in? What are your goals? And can I help you? Not only just with the copy, but also with the brainstorming and mapping out your ideas and mapping out a plan. So it's definitely grown into this beautiful coaching-esque copywriting business. And
Yeah.
I just enjoy it.
Yeah, it's not just about the writing the copy for you because so to give you an example, I Jolie and I had some just one session, I think we talked on Zoom and kind of had a brainstorming session. Then I sent you a billion resources of what I was like kind of how I write and things like that to give you an idea. And I knew you were going to capture my voice. Actually, that's one thing is I just instantly trusted that you would get it. And I don't know if that's actually because you have innate trust in yourself and I'm picking that up, but that's for me, it was a really easy decision. But I kind of threw out an idea for a 1 week course that I was going to do. And then next thing I know, you send me a voice note saying, okay, I have some ideas. I'm throwing them down. Can I share this Google Doc with you? And I was like, of course, but you really didn't have to go that extra mile. And then she sends me the best document, like all these ideas riffing off this one concept I had that hopefully will still come to life. It hasn't come to life yet. But that's just it's over delivering in the best possible way. And knowing that I totally appreciated it and that it would, and I was like, oh, well, if this turns into a course, well, then I'm obviously going to need you to do the copy for that as well. So, because there's only certain things, I think this is important to recognize as a business owner, there's only certain pieces you can do yourself then it gets to the point where it's not effective. And I knew I had some okay copy, but when I revamped my website, which I just launched in March, I think, um, that to me was a time for the transformation. Like I needed to clean things up. I needed to get a little bit more clear in my messaging and I needed someone else. I couldn't see it clearly myself. And that's why I wanted to work with you.
Yeah. And I think you really hit the nail on the head with that is when people are feeling so it's like your ideas can feel convoluted or you're just like, I'm so knee deep in my business and the day to day. And I don't have the time or the energy to write this or create this. That's not a bad thing. And asking for help is never a bad thing.
Yeah.
And I love being that person who's raising her hand, who's like, yeah, I'm here. I can help. I promise. And just knowing you and the work that you do, I was like, oh yeah, Alana's such a super cool human being, multifaceted, multi-passionate, creative. And even having that call and that chat was inspiration enough that I needed to be like, okay, cool. We're gonna morph this into some really cool copy. And then the ideas come through because it's almost in
Yeah.
an energetic sense. I'm in the
Hmm.
energetics of your business and your work
Yeah.
that you do. So ideas are naturally going to come through. So I always tell my people that I'm like, are you cool with me sharing ideas with you? And 99% of the time they're like, oh yeah, tell me. I'd love to hear that. So it's been a fun process. Yeah. And the self-trust is needs to be there for that to work.
Yeah. And I can't imagine anyone wanting less ideas or like, can't imagine you working with clients who wanted like not as many ideas. Like, yeah, I'm just like, bring it to me. This is amazing. Because I want someone else's perspective that I'm not seeing. I think that's an exciting moment where, like, even if it's one word and you're like, wow, I never thought to use that word. And you can springboard an entire marketing strategy from one word.
Absolutely. Marketing strategy, the vibe, all of it. It all comes together.
So, what would you say now is like one of the favorite things that you love about doing this kind of work now?
I think something that I've always enjoyed throughout anything that I've done is the teaching aspect. And so it's not that I'm teaching people how to write copy, but I've met so many people recently who they do have the time and the energy that they want to build their website or craft more social media, create more things for themselves. And I love being able to be part of that process and be hands on in a way of like, okay, cool, here are some techniques for you to implement to make this better if you want to write it yourself. So this is kind of multifaceted, right? Of I do have people like that. And then I've got people who are like, hey, I'd love to have some copy written for my website, for my sales page. And I know that you do brainstorming sessions and I'd love to do some brainstorming with you about like what could make things work. So truly, I love being part of the
Mm,
process
okay.
and I love being able to be hands on. was a very convoluted answer.
No, that makes a lot of sense because you're not just saying, give me here's the sales page that I'm going to like basically fill in the blank for you. Like it's not about that for you because you're really getting into, again, that strategy piece, getting to know the person. And then so much comes through that process.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's so many, even just looking, you scroll through listings for jobs and things like that. And I think where it gets kind of sketchy, maybe, if you will, is when you look at like copywriting specific jobs, how it can almost sound so robotic where you're expected to produce a certain number of words or just a certain amount of copy per day. And it's almost like, okay, in 2024, your business needs a human touch. I am the human touch.
Yes.
Right. And that's, if there's any takeaway, I think from this podcast is like that sentiment in 2024, your business needs a human touch. Like AI, it can write a website for you, but it's not going to resonate with people as much as having someone who knows you, knows your clients, knows the words that you're trying to get out of you, but maybe just can't.
Yeah. And you and I are both like intuitive feeler people. So it's like, you can tell when you go to someone's website and it's just chat GPT, or it's like very generic, or they've lifted it from it's just generic. And we cannot have generic now. I think it is all about the human touch. When I see a resume that's written chat GPT, I can usually tell it's not bad. It's passable. You're going to get the keywords. It's probably going to get through the system, but I don't really know who the person is. It's just using all this generic corporate garbage speak.
Wow, I didn't know people are
Oh
actually
yeah, and cover
using it
letters.
to.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Which it's like,
Wow.
I get it. Cover letters are the worst. Like I laugh. I help people with cover letters, and I was like, I hope these go the way of the dinosaur. I can't stand them, but here we are. But yeah, you can. So they don't have the same feeling, and it's fine for going through again, like when you submit your resume, it's just going through the systems. But there is a piece that's lost, and then if it's your website and your brand, I don't think anyone can afford to lose that personal touch right now. I think it's really important.
Absolutely. The consumers are getting smarter, and
Yeah.
especially going through, everything that happened in 2020. People are buying differently. People are looking at things differently, and they're investing their money in different ways. And people can tell when the words don't match up with the message. And
Yeah.
that's a really big one.
Yes. And then when the actions don't match up with the words too, that sometimes people figure out down the line.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, absolutely. And don't get me wrong, ChatGPT is something where even copywriters are encouraged to use it and
Yeah.
play around with it
Yeah.
for idea generation, for
Yeah.
outlines, and being able to tap into that is definitely a skill that a lot of places are even looking for when they list out, your skills on their job listings and things. But all that to say, it's a very slippery slope. Like, you need to make sure that you're using it just enough to kind of outline and maybe generate some ideas, but also
Yeah.
hands off after a certain point of like, okay,
Yeah.
we know how to write. We have the skills. We can do this.
Yes, we can. Is there a common thread between like the clients that come to you? Like, are you noticing a pattern? Like it's, oh, this kind of person, they're in this, obviously health and wellness is probably pretty strong there, but is there like, you're like starting to notice similarities between clients?
Definitely. I would say health and wellness and creatives. And
Okay.
the creatives I know is a word that you and I have also talked about
Yeah.
too, where it's such an interesting group of people. I mean, interesting in the best way, right? Like photographers,
Yeah.
hairdressers,
Yeah.
things like that. I have drawn some creatives into my life, into my work. Usually people who are in the first, I would say 1 to 4 or 5-ish years of their business, and they have an idea of who their ideal client is. Maybe they're
Okay.
making, the page has turned and they're trying to attract someone new. They're launching a new program. They are really going deeper with their work and they need someone to help capture that. So it's not necessarily a rebrand, but
Yeah.
it's someone who's in those first 1 to 5 years, let's
Okay.
call it,
Yeah.
trying to kind of attract a newer clientele or
Yeah.
talk to people in a deeper way.
Okay. So that seems to be like the common thread. And then what's the most common feedback that you get from those clients after you've worked with them?
The most common feedback, it's usually, well, the best thing is when people come back with like no notes or just this sounds great. And I would say that does happen.
Yeah.
However, there's usually edits made. The editing process is so important. But that common thread that most people will say is like, I can't believe you thought to use this word to describe
Mm,
me or to describe my work. That makes so much sense. And I think, you having this love of words too, I think that's so important because there's so many words that exist in the world and we
yeah.
just don't think of them.
Yeah.
And sometimes when that one or two magical words kind of come up or come through, people are like, you nailed it. This is great. This captures.
Are there any trends you're seeing with the way people are writing copy and like kind of the verbiage that's being put out there and the way people are communicating? Because like we talked about 2015, the hustle, boss babe, girl boss, like everything was very aggressive. I feel like more in the male energy. Now we're going more into the female energy. Are you seeing any trends with how people are talking and writing?
I'm seeing a lot of people really. Do you mean more in website or social media? Because they're two
Yeah,
total
well
different beasts.
let's look at both. Like what social media first. I'd be curious about that.
Yeah, with social media, I think video is dominating,
Yeah.
especially in this year. Long form videos are doing great, and really, really short form videos are doing great. People talking to the camera being, just as you said, less masculine, almost more
Yeah.
feminine, of like, let me invite you into my living room and just have this conversation with you. And so people, I think, are really trying to get more concise
Yeah.
with what they're saying in a video in a way that's capturing their audience within the first like 2 seconds
Okay.
because people can scroll away.
Hmm.
And then when it comes to website copywriting, I think the same thing is true. What a lot of people don't realize is longer websites actually do better when it comes to search engine optimization
Hmm.
and with people sticking around when there's more to read. People think that's going to
Yeah.
be, people are going to want to leave, but people love that. People want to know about you and
Yes.
know who you are. So,
Yes.
so yes, definitely you're seeing longer websites, especially longer sales pages and longer
Yeah.
descriptions for things.
Interesting. Yeah.
Um, yeah.
That fear that people are going to leave your website if it's too long. I think you need some pages that are nice and short. That's kind of how I tried to play it out. But then the deep dive, like who doesn't love a deep dive? I feel like
Absolutely.
it's like
Especially
going
the
down a
about
Reddit
me.
thread.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, Reddit's a whole other rabbit hole. But that's exactly with the about
Yeah.
me page too. People want to know about you. They
Yeah.
need to know, like, and trust you to buy from you. And they want to know, like,
I
cool,
know.
where'd she go to college? What did she
Yeah.
study? What's been her journey? And that's always a
Yes.
fun page to write too, because I always learn so much about people writing those pages too.
Yeah, but then you do have to get a little vulnerable. Like that was you did my about me page and it was like, okay, we got to put like some stories out there and yeah, talk about myself. Ugh, it's awful. You
And
made
it
it
feels
better, but
vulnerable.
yeah.
It feels vulnerable to use, but then,
Yeah.
I think there's such an interesting way to share it with the world that like your person is going to resonate with you,
Yeah.
not just based on the words that you use, but like based on your experiences too.
Yeah.
So
And I think that's like the sign that if you can put yourself out there and it feels good, like that's to me a sign of great copywriting. Because when it was done, I was like, yeah, I'm good like with this. It feels really authentic, feels really me. You're using like tons of the same words that I would use. Um, but I'm still revealing something about myself. Like there's still like I feel like it does help people get to know me. And I think that's what a great copywriter does. It's like they open up the door, but they can do it in a way that still feels really comfortable.
yeah. Yes. I'm so glad you said that because we're researchers and that's
Yeah.
such a big piece of it because we're not just chat GPTing it up with you
No.
asking us a question and then we
Yeah.
can churn it out really quickly. It's a process and it's an in-depth process. And I think uh, being able to kind of have that connection with whoever you're working with has been so important throughout all the work that I've ever done, but
Yes.
especially when it's writing copy because it's such a vulnerable, words are
Yeah.
vulnerable, words can
Yeah.
hurt, words
Yeah.
can evoke such emotion.
And I'm hoping what everyone gets out of this conversation is I'm a big believer in getting allies on your team. Like, whether you need a copywriter or not, getting people you can work with that can do things that you can't do for yourself, who are going to champion you, support you, and really help you put the best version of yourself out there.
Definitely. Yeah. And it's, again, coming back to that whole idea of things, like it doesn't need to be linear. It doesn't need to be someone who is just, you can have someone who is multifaceted and who can do design work. You can have someone who does design and copy. And there are so many multifaceted people out there, but having, getting yourself in the room where those people kind of exist, even just to network and be like,
Yeah.
oh, I think I know a designer. I think I know this
Yeah.
person. It's having those connections, I feel like, especially in the creative space, has been something that's been really eye-opening to me since I started writing copy too, of like, okay, there are a lot of people who knows someone who may need a
Yeah, it's the
copywriter
best.
or
It's the
yeah,
best. Like, I love when I get a text from someone. They're like, "Hey, I'm looking for this kind of person. Do you know someone?" I was like, "Yeah, I do." And it's like, you're going to talk to this friend of a friend who does this and specifically that, and building that network. And I'm like trying to just accumulate allies and people that are moving forward, have an amazing skill set. Like, that's also what I want to bring to this podcast, just getting people's skills out there. People do so many cool things.
yeah, yeah, it's so true. And so many people think that like, oh, I don't really bring much to the table, or
Yeah.
I'm boring, or
Yeah.
my story isn't
Yeah.
exciting. And it's like, no, that's the opposite. Like
Yeah.
what you think is mundane is actually not mundane at all.
No, it's not. Although what I do feel like I need to get on this podcast is someone who has had like the absolute most linear career ever, like just for some context and contrast. And I'm sure it's actually not as linear as we think it is. But yeah, I'm all about just surrounding yourself with all different kinds of people and just experimenting. And I love what you've brought to the table about trusting your gut, trying different things, taking some like well thought out, calculated risks.
Yes, those well thought out, calculated risks. But yeah, that's such an interesting thing to say, being such an
Yeah.
intuitive person. But yeah, when you take risks, you kind of need to have them thought out in a little bit of a way.
Yeah. Well, I think anyone who doesn't have a linear career is actually a disruptor in a way. And a disruptor is going to take risks. A disruptor has to take risks.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So
That's
you're
perfectly said.
you're a risk taker, Jolie. You may not know it, but like you are. Okay, so I want to end today. I've just learned so much about the different ways you can also build a copywriting career. So I love that. Let's end with one of my favorite questions here. So, in the spirit of helping people ditch the struggle, what do you feel is most important to commit to?
So I think we earlier in our conversation we were talking kind of about the thinky brainy of it all, and being a person who, I say, like, have 100 tabs open at a time in my mind, lots of ideas coming through. I think when I start questioning, like I latch onto an idea and I start questioning it and I say like, okay, well, like, how do I do this? What should this look like? And I get caught up in those whats and the hows. It's so easy to go for that external validation, that external confirmation,
Mm,
and kind of always coming back to that idea of, okay, how does this idea actually feel in my body? If this were to play out in the way that my heart and mind
mm,
have it playing out, would I be happy with that? Does that feel good to continue and to run with, so to speak? So being able to center back into the body and sink in and be, okay, how do I feel about this?
yeah.
And how would I feel if this were to succeed? How would I feel if this were to fail? And being able to run with that, and again, getting out of that thinky braininess and honing into the feelings that are present and working through those feelings.
Yeah. And just thinking ahead to like, what if it works, what it doesn't? Sometimes, and it can be really helpful actually to figure out what would happen if it didn't work, because it's not about being negative. It's like, okay, is the worst case scenario that bad anyway? So that can be just really helpful to just get that out of the table. But actually thinking forward is like, how will this play out? I love the way that you just said that. Super simple. How this plays out. How am I going to feel? Like really thinking about that, because we can get caught up in building a business and it's like, well, what if this actually becomes a success? What then happens?
Absolutely. Yeah. And just to add on to that too, this is something that I've done for years. And I wanted to share this because this kind of goes hand in hand. Like, yes, the feelings that are present and everything, but then also the reflection on how did you show up, right? Almost
Mm,
every week I do this exercise. A coach taught me this years ago. I write an email to myself or a note in my phone and I ask myself, okay, how did I show up this week? How did I show up for my clients? How did I show up for my family?
mm,
How did things play out? And you, once you start doing this exercise, you'd almost be shocked to know how many things that we see as mundane kind of come up on that list of
mm,
like, okay, cool. Like I was able to submit a project before a deadline. That's something that I probably wouldn't have given myself credit for, like that I actually showed up for, or
wow.
giving some ideas to someone, or even something like, I don't know, going to the grocery store and your groceries are under $100. Like, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
random things.
Yeah.
But when you can take time to reflect on that too,
Oh,
I think it allows you to sink into that present moment even more.
that is really powerful. So remind us again what that question was that you would ask yourself each week and journal on.
How did I show up? How did I show up
Mm,
this week?
mm. I love it. Thank you so much, Jolie.
Yeah.
It's amazing. I'm excited to keep working with you. I'll put everything in the show notes, but where can we find you?
Yeah. So I am on Instagram and Facebook, Jolie Rose on Facebook and jolierose.creative on Instagram. And those are the two places I hang out. I'm on LinkedIn too.
Perfect. We're going to find you. We're going to hunt you down. And if anyone has copywriting questions and the need for a copywriter, connect with this beautiful person because I know she's absolutely going to get your voice. I think that was what you were just amazing at, understanding my voice. And I see with other people you work with, you get their voice.
Well, thank you so much.
You're welcome. We'll chat again. Thank you for joining me today on Ditch the Struggle. You showing up here means so, so much to me. To dig deeper into the topics discussed today and to learn about my work, visit alanarosa.com. And don't forget to download your free resources while you're there. And if this episode resonated with you, please share with others who also want to ditch the struggle. Go ahead and subscribe to the podcast, leave a rating and a review, and let me know what you'd like to see more of on this podcast. And before I go, I want to leave you with my 3 favorite ways to ditch the struggle. Be your own best advocate, take baby steps for the win, and forget about a linear career path. It's overrated and you are doing just fine. See you next time.